Let me just read this text to you. It says, "The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me." But Jonah ran away from the Lord, and he headed to Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound to the port. After paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. I don't know about you, but when it comes to decisions in your life, and my decisions in my life, sometimes I do feel that some decisions in our life are just too small for God. I don't know about you, but like I feel like, usually when I make a list, things like famines and wars and all these things come above any of my things that I need to make a decision. But life has taught me the lesson, which is very important, and that is that there is no small enough decision or big enough, I would say, for God not to be involved in it. And certainly I have learned that through quite a few examples that happened to me. As I studied at Newport College for quite a few years, I was one of these students who didn't have opportunity to just focus on studies. I had to earn for my school fee because my dad was a pastor in Serbia, and Serbian dinar in comparison with British pound was very big difference. And so my mom and my dad bought me this ticket, which was a return ticket. And they said, in those days that was allowed. Now you can't buy them because they're afraid of terrorists. So what happened is, like, they bought me the open ticket and said, "Listen, son, we can pay for 1/4 of your year for the Newport College. And here's an open ticket. If you are not able to earn enough, or if you're not able to study and it's not going very well, the ticket is paid for you, so you can come back home. You're more than welcome." And of course, being Serbian, the thing you say to Serbians, if you just need to tell them, well, if you can't make it, or maybe you're not going to be able to earn enough, all these things, we just go so stubborn, just to let you know. We don't want to give up ever, and so what happens is I had the 5-6 part-time jobs at that stage, 62 hours a week, and then I was working and then doing my full-time studies. And I remember, and the first time I was traveling back home, it was not for good reason at that stage. I remember I had to find a ticket to go back. And there's somebody who, as I said, sometimes categorize God, what God is interested in and what God is not interested in. I decided I'm going to just go buy a ticket without any, thoughts about, what about we actually ask God, what do you want, how do you want me to travel, or where and what time? And I remember this. I went online and I found this ticket, which was so cheap that actually really it did not sound very good. So I went to my friends and I said, "I got this ticket for this much money," and they all were shocked. And they said, "Well, how come it's so cheap?" I'm like, "I don't know." And he says, "Did you read the small print?" I was like, "I didn't read small print. I'm so happy I have the cheapest ticket in the world." And somebody even asked me, "Are you traveling instead of the spare tire on a plane?" I said, "Maybe that could be a case." And I was really joking about this, really not giving any thought about what maybe God's plan in my life for that particular trip was. And I remember the reason why it was so cheap, because it will remain for the rest of my life. I flew from London to Belgrade. That was a perfect flight. And then on the way back, as I was traveling, I had a small medical procedure, and they gave me this drug, muscle relaxant. Anybody had that? Muscle? No. Well, did anybody watch a movie, Johnny English? Johnny English, when he has 2 rings, one is a serum of truth and one is a muscle relaxant, and then he pokes himself by accident, and he just, he can't even talk, and that's the drug which they gave me. And being Serbia, that generous people, they gave me more than I should have. It was actually a very worrying moment, just to let you know, sitting on that desk when the anesthesiologist walked in and looked at me. He said, "You're a big man." I said, "I don't know what it means." He says, "I will give you more drugs." I was like, "No need. Actually, really, just give me what I need." But no, he gave me more. And so what happened was, now on the way to the airport, as I was leaving Serbia, I had this procedure, and this procedure happened. I remember, sitting down, being very relaxed, as when doctor said to my mom, she was there. She says, he needs to rest now for another 5-6 hours, and then, maybe he can start kind of, doing stuff. And my mom said, "Well, but he's going to airport right away from this point and flying back to London." To what I can remember, the face of doctor, he was in a shock. He was in a horror. He said, "That's the worst thing you can do to him, because he's very relaxed. And my mom knew that even when I was not relaxed, I was getting in trouble. And she just looked at me as mom, even though I was an adult. And she looked at me, she's like, listen, boy, listen, you go to that plane, you sit down, you do not talk to anybody, you just get there and get off the plane, do not talk to anybody. And she was so worried that I'll mess up, and I did actually mess up. And so what happened is, and of course, I flew back to London, but not knowing why the ticket was so cheap, I realized that there is a layover time in Vienna for 8 hours. And so what happens, instead of flying to London, which I thought I'm going to London, I flew to Vienna, and when I landed, I realized this is not London. And then Austrian police decide to make a checkpoint between the plane from Vienna to London, which is not good, because at that stage I had a Serbian passport, and you can buy one on eBay if you want. It's very cheap, and so they were very suspicious already. But just seeing me, and I was relaxed and had a smile on my face. And when they were checking this, between these airplanes, they have this terrible sense of humor, if they have any at all. They looked at me and they said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to London." And they said, "Can we see your passport?" I gave them my passport, and they started looking at my passport. That is the moment you start wondering, is everything okay? They're looking, and they come bring the passport closer, and then he calls his friend. And that is like a moment you're like, oh, this is not good. And he comes, and he pulls the magnifying glass, and he starts checking the passport. And I'm like, oh, this is not good. And they look at me, and they say this sentence: the picture in your passport is fake. You need to prove your identity to us. Let me just give this. I'm very relaxed. For me, this I'm like, oh, really? And so I said, how did you know? Not meaning how did you know it's fake, but how did you know the picture is fake? Because I was like, I never heard the picture can be fake. I've really struggled with that context altogether. But Austrian police, as I said, zero sense of humor, and I took a passport away from him, and being relaxed, I did this. I said, this is me. And they did not look happy. I flipped the page because I was Serbian. I needed a visa to go to toilet practically, just like, my passport was full of visas. I flipped the page, there was a visa, and there was my picture there. This is me. And I flipped the page, and I said, guess who's coming? And when I did that, I didn't even touch my nose. Like, you need to go with us to the police station. So I got arrested, just to let you know. They took me to police station, and I was sitting with criminals. And in that moment, I realized, really, I shouldn't be here. But thank God I had 8 hours layover. It took them only 6 hours to confirm my identity. That's how fast they work. And I managed to get to London. I remember as I was flying the last leg of journey, I was thinking, this is the reason my ticket was cheap. But this is also the reason why maybe we should involve God, and you should involve God in every decision that you make. You see, Jonah is a man who is a prophet of God, and you know very well he was on a payroll of God. And he shows very clearly that God took good care of him. If you notice his actions is after he decides to run away from God, which is really, really interesting concept as well. How can you run away from God? God is probably just like looking at him as he's running to the port of Joppa, and God is just like, is he running? I think he's running away. I can just see it as he goes on that boat, and boat is traveling like for 2-3 hours, and God's like, I think he's running. And he's like, how is it possible that the man I love and take care of is trying to run away from me? And the reason I'm saying that God is taking good care of him is because of this very clear fact, and that is that he decides to buy the ticket from Port of Joppa to Tarshish. And if you look the map of those days, that was the known world. So this was like this is the map they looked. There was no like all England and Australia. That was the world, the Middle Eastern part, because Tarshish was in Spain, and Joppa was the Middle East, and that's it. And it really clearly shows that God took good care of him, because he had enough cash in his pocket to buy the ticket from one part of the world to another part of the world. That's like from Sydney to, I don't know what's the other part. Is it New York or maybe not? Yeah, maybe, I don't even know. He had enough money on that very spot to go and cash out the ticket. And as he goes on that boat, he is very clear about one thing, that he is not going to the city of Nineveh. And simple reason for that is the same reason that you and me would run away probably, or try to run away, is Nineveh had a terrible hobby. Nineveh and the people who lived there, they were, some of them maybe, I would say, more bloodthirsty nations or cultures that existed at that point of time. These people would go to the war, they would kill a lot of people, they would plunder, and then guess what? They would take a group of hostages back to the city of Nineveh, and then they would call a festival in which they would march them to the city and then kill them as they're marching through. And so the story obviously came to Jonah. He was like, well, listen, mate, I would like to live a little bit longer, and totally forgetting that until this point of time, God never let him down. Never let him down. Now he's in the boat. You know the story. Storm comes. They don't know what to do, and they decide to do exactly what they would do in those days. They're like, well, somebody's guilty here. So if we sacrifice one of us, maybe, or somebody on this, and they, of course, throw Jonah in the water. I was surprised when I found the list of British people. I think BBC actually publishes saying 100 things people in England want to do before they die. It's very, very British. It's not like 100 things people want to do in Britain while they live. It has to be a little bit on the downside. And so first number one is to see the space, see the earth out of space. That's number one. Number two is something else. Number three is actually British people like to swim with dolphins. I was thinking if I lived in England, I could have opened a business, rent a dolphin, and we deliver it to your bath. But it seems to me, Jonah, as he was swimming in that, fighting for his life, God decided to fulfill him maybe the number three wish from a BBC list. The only issue is that all dolphins were very busy at that stage. So a big fish came and swallowed him. And then we found a moment where he found himself in a point of total desperation. And then when you see what he is saying, he's praying a beautiful prayer. You should read the book of Jonah and you will find out. He is praying about this prayer, how God has forgotten him in the depths of the oceans and all these things. And when you check this prayer, you'd realize that Jonah is not praying the prayer. All he's doing is quoting one of the Psalms that he learned as a child. A Psalm that mom told him, hey, repeat this Psalm to me. And you see, in the moments of total desperation, when we're going through a hard time, sometimes we do not have strength to pray the prayers, but only thing we can is remember the prayers that we learned as a children. Jonah is praying the prayer totally unaware that in all of the plan that he has, God has a bigger plan. And as you know, Jonah pretty much pulls the card from Monopoly, go back to start. Who likes that card? And I remember, and then Jonah is like, instead of being, swollen or eaten and dying, all of these things, your fish brings him back to the port of Joppa. It's a truly a moment, and it's a miracle for sure. If you remember children's Sabbath schools, there is always this picture, how, there is a whale in the background, opens his mouth, and then little Jonah walks out, if it was animated, they would probably even put a light bulb inside of the mouth of the whale. He's walking out, and I'm like, well, it wasn't that pretty for sure. Because there is only two ways out of the fish, is that right? And I'm sure it was not pleasant, but he got a better way out for sure as well. If the mom and daughter were walking on the beach of Port of Joppa, and they saw this, how the fish comes and vomits the man out, trauma for life. That's like you walking in Australia and you're just like, oh, there's such a beautiful cow. The next moment the cow vomits the man out. You'll be taking free counseling sessions that SPD offers, straight away. And the bottom line is this, that simply, despite his plans, God had a bigger plan. And the big plan about all of this is simple fact that I found in history, that the people in Nineveh, they worship God called Dagon. And the God Dagon is the God which was half human and half fish. If you would like to see how it looks like, you just need to check the Starbucks sign and realize that it was shaped in the same way as God Dagon. And the God Dagon that they worshipped in Nineveh Nineveh was a God of fertility. In other words, if there was a harvest, they would be thanking him. If there was a baby, they would be thanking him. If there was lambs and if it was going well, he was the God they worshipped and loved. And simply what happens is this, as you know, is Jonah walks from the port of Joppa, and he's now accepting that God has the bigger plan. He is now going to the city of Nineveh, and when he walks in, he says, guys, you need to fix your life, and nothing happens to him. And not only that, actually people of Nineveh listen to him. And the reason why they listen to him is because God always has the best plan. That is the story of the man who was brought to the port of Joppa by the fish travels to Nineveh faster than Jonah can travel. And when he arrives to the city which heard the news of somebody even believing there could be the Son of God, the God, who is coming to them to bring him the message. In other words, him being thrown into water and being swallowed by the fish and then vomited out by the fish. And then, he had to wash because he smelled probably terrible. And then he walked all the way. All of this had a one plan, and that is that God will set the scene for him to that level that when he comes there, people will listen to him. And not only that, spare his life. I don't know about your decisions in life and I know about mine, but I realize that I need to trust the bigger plan of God. I don't know what always that is. I can tell you that sometimes these moments are very painful. Sometimes it does feel that I was thrown off the ship and then being swallowed by the fish. Sometimes it does feel God really doesn't know what he's doing. But I just want to assure you that as you live your life, as you are thinking about your present and your future, as you're making plan for ministry of God, to know that there is a bigger plan. And in all of this, I just want to encourage you that you give every single detail of God, every single detail of yours to God, and let him be part of that plan. And this is what I want to leave with you this morning, to tell you there is no small decision enough for God not to be interested in. And he's certainly there for some bigger decisions in your life. But the best part in my life is I found out living life with him as a part of my decisions in the center of my life is the right way to go. We're going to finish here.